Hi, everyone. My name is Risay Candelaria, and I want to welcome and to thank you for joining us today. I'm a current member of Impact Austin, and today I will be serving as the moderator for today's event. I'd like to start off by recognizing the sponsors for our session today, Schwab Charitable and Mariner Wealth Advisors. I'd like to thank you for your support of Impact Austin and, of course, in many of our events that we hold throughout this year. I'd also want to take a minute to introduce you to Impact Austin if you're not familiar with us. We do lots of good things here in this Austin community, such as, being founded since 2003 and having given over $7 million in grants over our history to over 68 organizations. As a collective giving organization here in Central Texas, philanthropy education is a key tenet of what we do. And so I'm excited to introduce our speakers today that are going to tell us more about investing, women's philanthropy, and how we can make a bigger impact in our community. So with that being said, let me introduce today's speakers. First up is Mary Jovanovich from Schwab Charitable, who has more than 10 years of experience with Charles Schwab and Company. Mary is a senior relationship manager where her commitment to building successful relationships between advisors and clients is based on incorporating charitable planning into that wealth management. I'd also like to introduce you to Suzanne Wheeler, a certified financial planner, accredited investment fiduciary designee, and a certified financial transitionist. She is a managing director for Mariner Wealth Advisors with over 2 decades of experience in helping her clients meet their financial goals. Today's session will actually start with Suzanne, and she will be sharing data with us about the investment gap and research on women's investing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Suzanne.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're talking about one of my favorite topics, women in general and investing through a gender lens. I wanted to just share with you that these slides that Mary and I will will be available for you after the presentation, so you don't have to worry about taking notes. Next page. This is one of my favorite quotes from a mentor and a friend of mine. When money changes, life changes. And when life changes, money changes. It's interesting how we go through life and see this quote come to reality for each of us. Next page. So just why is financial empowerment so important? As these statistics show, women's wealth and stature is growing, which is very exciting for all of us. The expected amount that women will control by the end of the year is $22 trillion. Take note of the women's executives in the S&P 500 statistic. Love seeing that and love where we are headed, but we have more work to do. Next slide. According to Vanguard's men's retirement account balances are 50% higher than women's. Not only is that frustrating on principle, but it's particularly painful when you consider women live 6 to 7 years longer than men. Next slide. So women are the new breadwinners. So I'm sure that is putting a smile on several of your faces. But in more than 40% of American households, women are the primary breadwinners. That's 4 times more than it was in the 60s. The reality is that female employees still earn less than their male counterparts. This, along with the fact that women take off to care for children, it leaves them behind in the race for accumulating enough in retirement. A lot of times we talk with women about going part-time with their work schedule instead of dropping out of their career if possible. Having half the contribution in retirement plans during those crucial years of saving and investing can make a big impact. It's great news that women are becoming more entrepreneurial, but that presents the challenge of all of their cash into the business and not into savings towards retirement plans. And the last thing we'll comment on here is women lack confidence in investing. This is not for all women, but some, and they're more adverse to risk. I think with a little education, this can change. And we've been a thinking partner to many women that are collecting their investment strategy. Next slide. The investment gap is a reality. I think women are better at seeking help and they feel more comfortable in delegating. Also, when we're thinking about married couples, they're 85% of the women delegate those long-term financial decisions to men. And I think it's primarily because we, as married couples raising a family, we're in a dividing and conquering state, and that tends to be left towards the male counterpart, as the women are doing other chores in the household and getting their children to school and sporting events. But I think it's time for women to get engaged, and we're seeing that across the U.S., but we need to keep increasing that percentage. Next slide. This is interesting, an interesting statistic. When you look at a married woman, a two-income household, and then a single woman in a one-income household, the difference in the savings, the married couple tend to spend more and save less. So one of the things I will put out there is, the single income household, they're depending on themselves. They don't have someone else to rely on. So, in these situations, both two income and one income household, I'd beware of lifestyle creep. We all work hard and we all want to be treated, but we should do that within reasonable states. Next slide. So you alone will most likely have to manage your finances. So get in the game now. And I would say let's start engaging and start today. Next slide. What is the game? The game is never run out of money, but it's also a game of enjoying the journey along the way. Next slide. This is one of my favorite slides. We talk a lot in our industry about stocks and bonds and savings plans, but in reality, you are your most valuable asset. Next slide. Your lifetime earning capacity is your largest investment, one that you can control and deserves proper planning. Understanding your benefits in your current position today, those benefits mean more than just your salary and your bonus or bonuses, I hope. If you work for a large company, you may have deferred compensation in the form of restricted stock or stock options, but you also need to know the value of the insurance and, your time off and other benefits. You should understand all of your benefits. Women are not known for negotiating. With men, they will ask for more and consider negotiating a required skill in the business world. To do this, you need to understand what you're negotiating for, what you want, and get prepared. Resources that you can take a look at are listed here below. Again, you don't have to take notes. We'll have that for you. But these resources may be able to help you getting prepared for those negotiatings, whether it's for a promotion in your current employment or if you're seeking new employment. Next slide. So when we talk about investing, this is a slide that will just kind of set the background. You can see the returns, expected returns on the left-hand side, and the risk in achieving those returns down below. So you can see that, you're looking at cash and bonds. They can be pretty safe over time and lower returns. I will tell you those returns that we're pointing to look pretty nice for cash and bonds right now, but this is looking over a long-term period. When you add equity to the mix, you can see that you're achieving higher returns, but you're also taking higher risk. And then when you are looking out to be aggressive in maybe your younger years while you're still accumulating and looking at 100% equity portfolio, you can see you're on the upper scale of risk, but that return is a little nicer as well. Next slide. And I always like to talk about two sides of money. As mentioned, I am a certified financial transition, which is helping people with the personal side of money as we go through different life transitions, such as starting a new career, changing jobs, retirement, a divorce, a death. The technical pieces we pick up, and that's normally where we spend our time. But you also need to remember this personal side, and your advisor should too, as that change over your career track as well as your saving time period. We need to be flexible. Next slide. So when we're looking at risk and return and digging down a little bit deeper on the S&P sectors, which those are large cap areas, you can see again the returns on the left-hand side and the risk on the lower half of the page or at the bottom of the page. And you can see where different areas of sectors show up. So technology, we've certainly heard a lot. And, it's on the higher risk category, but the returns are much greater, certainly much greater that's shown on this slide this year, but an area that we see a lot of return in. Healthcare, seeing more returns there with a little less risk. But then energy, you can see lower returns and a lot of risk. So this is just a snapshot to show you where different areas show up on the return aspect. Next slide. So investing vehicles. You've heard of stocks, you've heard of bonds, you've heard of mutual funds and exchange traded funds. So when you're looking at stocks, you're buying shares in a particular corporation. So say Apple, everybody knows Apple. You're buying shares of the stock in Apple. Those shares trade every minute, all day long through the trading hours. And you buy at a different price minute by minute. Bonds are you're loaning someone money for a promise of an interest payment, as well as a maturity date where those funds will come back to you. They'll repay the loan. In mutual funds and exchange traded funds, you're actually buying a basket of stocks. So, mutual funds may have 30, 50 or more stocks. So it's more diversified. You're not putting all your eggs in one basket. The mutual funds are traded at the end of the day. So you may put your order in at 9 a.m. in the morning, but it's not going to settle and give you your price until the close of the trading session that day. The exchange traded funds, again, a basket of stocks, well diversified, and but in this instance, it's trading every day or every minute of the day. So you're able to, you know, get in at 9:30, you see something you want to invest in, and you get that price minute by minute. Next slide. So before you think about creating a plan and what might work for you or your family, let's get a little bit personal. Next slide. So we talk about values-based investing, and we've heard a lot about that over the years. It's becoming more and more popular, which I'm really excited about. So you think of the areas of, you know, what does it look like for you? Aligning your investments with your values, making the world a better place. Doing good with your money, which Mary will tell us more about that later, and sleeping better at night, knowing that you're investing in something that is with your values in mind, and also, you know, not worried about as much volatility that you can handle. The last, and one of my favorite areas, is the power of the purse. And so, you know, what do we mean by power of the purse? It's where you spend your money. It's where you invest your money. It's how you vote, and it's how you give with your money. So you have all those choices. So, you know, we're all about empowering you today. So keep that in mind as you're looking at your investment strategy. Next slide. So how do we get started? This is the fun part. Next slide. So when you're thinking about an investment plan, you know, typically people will think that market timing is everything. Oh, the market is down today. Should I buy in, or should I wait to see if it goes lower? But I would suggest that getting the allocation right is the most important, and you can see that area is 91% of the time. That's what helps you achieve those goals. Next slide. Retirement plan choices. So if you're participating in a retirement plan, the things that you might take a look at: target dates, life point funds. Those are easy to select if you base it to that retirement date, or, you know, your risk tolerance. It's easy. You can go on autopilot. But, you know, some of the cons on that, if you are investing based on an age, you know, maybe it's taking more risk if you are a little more conservative. Individual funds, you know, certainly looking at that and rebalancing is important. You don't want to get out of your risk tolerance. And so it's so great to see an investment go up, but maybe it's time to rebalance, take some of those gains off the table. The only other thing I would say here is if you can make the maximum contribution to your 401k each year. If it's a struggle to get there, certainly at a minimum, make sure that you are contributing enough to receive the employer's match. Next slide. The savings investment, having a 6-month rainy day fund or a cash comfort level is certainly different for everyone, but that's a personal decision and one that you need to make on your own and where you feel comfortable. Then investments that, you know, you can do for specific goals, college savings plan, vacation or long-term portfolio growth, you know, or a goal of paying off the mortgage. Monthly or quarterly investing over the long term won't matter. It's actually a way to dollar cost average in so you're able to participate in different times of the market. Next slide. Staying on track, how often to review and how to determine if you're on track. I think you need to review at least annually at a minimum. You know, quarterly, it's nice to see your performance. Semi-annually, you know, are you on track? If you're not, you need to adjust so you can get back on track. And so when we think about what does being on track look like, you know, are you saving what you thought you would? Are your investments providing the performance that you thought it would? And maybe you need to take an adjustment with your savings, but maybe it's not making rash decisions with your investment portfolio. It's taking a look at what's doing well, what's not doing well, and should they be doing well? Should the manager that you've selected be doing well? And if they're not, why? Choosing the appropriate benchmark is not only how your portfolio is doing, but it's, you know, comparing to the market index that you read about. And so, you know, if your portfolio is doing well compared to the benchmark, great. If it's not, maybe you need to make some changes. Next slide. So just putting a plan in place is a great way to start. You know, I know that people that I've met with seem to think, oh, I'm embarrassed, I haven't saved enough. Please don't be embarrassed. It's time to start. You need to know where you stand and where retirement looks like for you, what it looks like for you. Just do it. Just start today. Next slide. So lessons learned. You know, how did you feel in March when we saw the stock market decline? You know, having that long-term plan will help ease some of that anxiety. And, you know, investing doesn't have to be complicated. You know, you can see portfolios that are way complicated that, you know, aren't gaining any more returns than a manageable, keeping it simple portfolio. But remember, we are our most valuable asset. So working on maximizing your value is the most important here, and knowing your value, having the confidence that you are doing a great job and that you are well compensated for that. You know, hope for the best, plan for the worst. I would say, you know, no more sign here, baby. You need to know what you're signing. I'm always telling my daughters, don't sign anything that you don't know what you're getting into. Know where your accounts are, how they're titled. You know, having those conversations with parents and children, you know, about, you know, how they are with their finances and should they get started. You know, do we really owe more to our children than straight teeth and a college education? I will tell you that many of the clients that I work with that are working so hard to save for a legacy for their children aren't looking for that inheritance. And they'd rather see their parents enjoy it as well as look at how they would like to help their charities. And so Mary will tell us more about that, but there's nothing more gratifying than being able to help the causes that you believe in. Trust but verify and choose wisely. Next slide. These are, you know, some things that can derail the plan. Nobody wants to think about divorce, but again, you know, knowing where you stand. Children and parents' financial challenges, illness, misplaced trust with a partner or an advisor, overspending, not taking enough risk, or taking too much risk. Next slide. These are resources that might be helpful for you. Again, they'll be given out to you on the slides. Next slide. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and maybe taken a tip or two, but leaving you with investing is worthwhile. Knowing your value is worthwhile, and above all else, just get started now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. You've just given us some great information about how we can be brave and invest to basically support our values and achieve impact. So that brings me to our next speaker, Mary Jovanovich, who will now share 4 investment strategies that can help fuel the momentum behind investing in and supporting organizations, products, and services that specifically benefit women. Thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here. So what I'm going to talk about is gender lens giving and investing strategies. And I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into what Suzanne has just said and enable you to understand how do you take that information and potentially put it into action. So how are women making a difference? Well, just as Suzanne had discussed with us, American women are really seeing real progress when it comes to financial equality and empowerment, despite that wage gap. Globally, as opposed to what Suzanne focused on with her statistic, is that women will own about $22 trillion by 2020, but globally, women's accumulated assets could reach $110 trillion by 2025, according to the Boston Consulting Group. So women are actually using that rise in economics power and influence to make a difference in the world in new, powerful ways, including investing in companies and supporting nonprofits that promote greater women's equality. So why is this happening? Well, first, women are more deliberate with their charitable giving strategy, with 78% creating an annual giving plan and/or budget compared to 72% of the men. And women enjoy collecting giving. As you've learned, Impact Austin alone has given $7 million to over 68 different organizations. And women are more likely to use impact investing to complement their charitable giving. And women tend to see giving as a mean to articulate their values, which takes higher priority over performance in some cases. So 4 strategies to create a gender lens approach to investments and gifts. But before I start that, I think it's really important to go over the philanthropic learning curve, because for many of us on the call, we could be at different stages of our lives. We could be younger, we could be in our 30s, our 40s, 50s, or we could be, getting ready to retire. So there are different areas that you need to think about where you are on your philanthropic journey. First, you become a donor. And that could be donating, how your time, your talent, your treasure, your ties, or your testimonies. It doesn't always have to be about giving dollars. And next, you decide to get organized. And then you become a learner. That's probably why you're here today. And then you're going to become issue and results oriented. And your philanthropy starts to be leveraged. And that's what I'm going to do with these 4 strategies today, is help you leverage that results issue oriented concept that you're focusing on. And eventually what's going to happen is you're going to be able to align your vision, your passion, your interest with your philanthropy. So where do you start? Step 1. The first step, like Suzanne talked about with values-based investing, is identify your values. And some motivational values to consider could be traditional, it could be an opportunity, it could be loyalty, it could be justice, or it could be leadership. For me, my personal journey and my values are based on my childhood. One of the most impactful situations that happened to me personally, there are 2 that have driven my philanthropic mission to support women and girls' causes, is first when I was 8 years old and I was in the grocery store with my Aunt Sari. And my mom had asked me to help her buy the most affordable food at that time, because back then, when I was 8 years old, women would get their Social Security checks, and we would take her to the bank, and we would cash it, we would pay the bills at the bank, and then we would go to the grocery store and buy the majority of her food for the month. And one of the things that my mom had me focus on is that she was on a limited budget, and she really needed to take that money as far as she could. So I was learning math, and I was trying to help my Aunt Sari pick the cheapest brand of food. And we were in the fruit aisle, and she had picked up a can of peaches, Del Monte peaches, and I did the math, and I realized that the generic brand was cheaper. And in this case, back then, generic brands weren't as pretty as they are now. They were a white can with black labeling that said peaches. And I put that in the cart, and my aunt took it out and replaced it. It was in that moment when I was having the conversation with my aunt that she had to admit that she didn't know how to read. And so by her buying that can with just the word peach on it, she would not know what was in her cupboard. And that is why she had to buy the Del Monte. I didn't understand that as an 8-year-old. And so my mom had to explain to me that she didn't receive an education. Fast forward, I'm 18 years old, and I had the incredible experience of being a Rotary Exchange student. And for me, I went to Brazil not knowing the condition of Brazil or how people lived there. I was very fortunate. I was able to stay with a very wealthy family who had a maid. That maid was 12 years old. I've never in my life to this day ever seen another individual work as hard as that 12-year-old. So for me, I made the decision at that point in my life that women and girls needed to be my priority and what I needed to study in the future. So I would ask you to think about what's happened in your life and what you're passionate about. Next, you're going to start to align your philanthropy and investments once you decide what's important to you. So gender impact investing can mean many things. It could be investing in companies that are owned or led by women. It could be backing enterprises whose products or services improve women's lives. It could be investing in companies that commit to gender equality in their operations and culture, or you could be evaluating their suppliers and partners' performance on gender issues. But philanthropic giving alone is not sufficient to make the change many people want to see in this world, but it plays an essential role and also enables you to learn about both the systematic roots of problems and the nature of solutions. Investments offer the potential to use market forces to make change at scale, but may be limited by required returns or size. When combined with philanthropy and sustainable investments, it's going to help you increase your opportunity to drive positive social and environmental changes. And what do I mean by that? Well, when they're used in tandem, when you look at your philanthropic goals and your investments, so where you're giving your money to and where you're investing, when they're used in tandem, they can help achieve maximum impact. Even if you're not deploying both giving and sustainable investing to affect change, it helps to be mindful of how they work together. And for example, here is a possible scenario. Let's look at the grant side. First, you can see one area that you could potentially grant your money to would be Impact Austin. Another local charity could be Mother's Milk Bank Austin, the Refuge for DMST, or LifeWorks. That's where you could potentially give your money away. Now, maybe you're not ready to give your money away. Maybe you're in that accumulation stage in your life. So you really need to focus on the investment side and not the giving side. In this case, this is where you could potentially work with Mariner Wealth Advisors to get that guidance. What's really interesting is back in 2018, Impact Shares and the YWCA of Chicago launched the first of its kind ETF on the New York Stock Exchange. It allows investors to deploy capital in companies whose business practices align with gender equality. So impact shares like WOMN uses capital markets to further the YWCA's mission of eliminating racism and empowering women. The profits go back to YWCA in Chicago. Another thing you could do is you could look at a particular underlying investment. And so PAC Sustainable Allocation Fund, which is something that we offer at Schwab Charitable, again allows you to invest in an ESG strategy. So most people give because of altruistic reasons. They see a need and they want to help out. However, I'd like to suggest a new way of thinking about your giving and to consider it as part of your investment strategy. Just like your current investment strategy, there are key concepts to consider to maximize your overall impact. And first, it starts with the conversation. And that's where Suzanne can help in that area and other advisors. Because what they're going to do is they're going to actually help you understand the best giving vehicle to use as it relates to your philanthropy. What's the best asset to use? Cash typically isn't the best asset to give charity to. You might be holding on to an appreciated asset like Apple stock, or maybe you own a business, or maybe you have a piece of real estate. So understanding how you can utilize those assets could actually help you make your giving go further. Timing. Timing can mean everything. Back in 2017, when tax reform was passed, a lot of people took advantage of being able to give more money in 2017 than in 2018, because if you were in the top tax bracket of 39.6% and you gave $100,000 directly to a charity, you could claim a full fair market value, or excuse me, you could claim your charitable deduction at $39,600. Then they changed the tax bracket to 37% in 2018. Giving that same amount would have reflected $37,000. So as you can see, there's a big difference when it comes to those types of strategies. And then identifying tax benefits and implications. Again, that goes back to that tax bracket and updates to tax reform and also the CARES Act. So why do we talk about utilizing appreciated non-cash assets? I like to call this my Jack and Jill example. Let's pretend, for example, that we all purchased Apple stock back in February of 2006, prior to the iPhone when it was trading around $8 a share. We put $5,000 in, fast forward to 2020, and now that $5,000 has appreciated to $100,000. Each one of us on this call is subject to the potential capital gains of $95,000 if we sell it. And in this hypothetical, we're in the top tax bracket of 37%. Not knowing how taxes work, we might go to a local charity, and I do know that Impact Austin does accept publicly traded securities directly through the Community Foundation, so you can utilize this strategy with them if you wanted to give stock. But let's say, for example, you went to a different nonprofit, and they don't accept publicly traded securities, but they would take your cash. You go back home and you sell your stock. Well, by doing so, you're going to have to pay Uncle Sam capital gains tax, and in this case, it's $19,000. You still get the value of your charitable deduction less the capital gains tax paid at $10,970, and you get to give your charity $81,000, and you feel really, really good about that. But by opening up a donor-advised fund or giving your stock directly to the charity, now you don't have to pay Uncle Sam any capital gains tax. Instead, the value of your charitable deduction significantly increases to $37,000. So look at what you get to gain there. You get a higher deduction. But more importantly, you get to give your charity the full $100,000. Now, the question sometimes becomes, should I open up a donor advised fund account, or should I give my stock directly to the charity? And the answer is very simple. If you are comfortable giving that full $100,000 this year to that charity, or it could be multiple charities, if you're comfortable giving that full $100,000 in 2020, then by all means, go direct and give to the charity. But if you're going to be utilizing this strategy to take this $100,000 and give it over time, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that's where a donor advised fund can be very advantageous, because the deduction is based on when you contribute and not distribute. So what we like to say at Schwab Charitable is that tax savings equals more money for charity. But what I like to say is that you're creating a culture of caring. Because let's step back and look at this again. Not only do you win, not only does the charity win, they get to serve more people. And those people go home and touch the lives of other people. And this is a net that you're casting out far greater than yourself. And that's how you create a culture of caring. So how do we execute for total impact? Well, in this case, what we have is I'm suggesting that you open up a donor advised fund account. And by doing so, ideally what you're going to do is you're going to deposit an appreciated asset. At Schwab Charitable, our requirement to open up a donor advised fund account is $5,000, and that balance doesn't need to be maintained. You deposit that security in kind to your donor advised fund account, and you get to avoid the capital gains tax associated with that appreciation. And if you itemize, you might be able to claim a charitable deduction. Once the money is into the donor advised fund account, now you get to invest it. And again, you could potentially invest it in some of these socially responsible funds. The money grows tax-free, And then what will happen is now you get to do the fun part, as Suzanne said. You get to give the money away based on who, when, and how much on your time schedule. So you get to actually create impact with that investment and then give that money away. The financial returns will go back into reinvestments for you to maybe potentially give later. But most importantly, you're creating, again, more money for you to give to charities by avoiding that capital gains tax. So final thoughts before we get finished. The time is now. According to the Walton Social Impact Initiative Project, SAGE, total capital with gender lens cleared $22 billion in 2018 and is increasing. So impact investing is not intersectional. It's not just the narrow lens of women and men, but from a broader lens of intersectionality. It needs to go beyond gender and look at inclusion as well. And then account for gender in all decision making. Overlaying impact at the corporate level ensures that both a company's product and its leadership team creates opportunities for women to thrive. And finally, data is nothing without action. Investing in women is not a risk, it's a normal opportunity. So my final thoughts to you all today are: find your purpose, begins with what matters to you most, your core values and social or environmental issues. Identify the change you would like to see in your community or in the world. Then let your purpose associated goals inform and guide you how you deploy your assets. It could be what you consume, how you invest, or how you give your money away. And make your giving and volunteering and investing decisions to further the change that you seek. Start by asking your advisor, or if you don't have an advisor, maybe find an advisor, and ask, how might my investments help create the future I want to live in? Giving and investing for social change doesn't need to be overwhelming. In fact, our goal is to have you experience the joy of giving. But just like Suzanne said, it's never too late to start, and all you need to do is start the conversation. And finally, just be generous and timely with your giving, whether it's your time, your talent, your treasure, your testimony, or your tithes. More than ever, nonprofits need us in 2020.
Thank you so much, Mary. You have both given us some great information to change our hopes and our dreams for our dollars into impactful actions for our philanthropic efforts. Thank you so much for sharing your information today. So now what we're going to do is take some questions from our Facebook Live comments. And I encourage those of you to, if you have other questions that you're thinking of, please put those in the chat and we will definitely respond to them as we get, as we have time. And then of course at the very end, we will hopefully give each of you some time to respond or add in anything, any final thoughts that you have. So let's start with our first question. If a woman's plan does get derailed, such as a divorce, where is the best place to start again as far as financial planning goes?
Well, I would say the outlook is now different. The first planning was as a couple, and now that has changed. So it's one of those things where we talked about being flexible. Look at the new resources that you have, which were probably less than what you thought you had. And readjust. Readjust how you can save, how you can spend. Hopefully there was some type of division of assets, but I would say, negotiate hard on those assets. And you just have to be prepared to adjust. And it's not a failure. It's not that, life won't be the same. It won't be the same. But I would look for the opportunities with that transition that, you are the sole decision maker now in how you spend and how you save and how you grow. And so, yes, it's a disappointment, but it's opportunities. Don't look backwards.
All right, thank you so much. Our next question actually is for Mary. So Mary, is there a resource that monitors investment opportunities through issues such as DEI and sustainability?
So I guess the question becomes like what you're investing in, because, and Suzanne can speak to this as well, when you invest your money, there's always a way for you to track your performance. And there are various ways that you can track your performance. You can either track the performance from the underlying investment itself, so that you can see they have what they call performance report cards. And so you can check out the performance report card of that underlying investment. And then what you can do is you can then look at some of the ratings that are out there. And when I was an investment advisor, I used to look at Morningstar quite frequently, because what Morningstar would do is Morningstar would compare it to sort of similar competitors in the field and sort of rank them against their sort of equivalents, I guess you could say. And then there's the way that you can actually look at it from a market perspective, and we call that benchmarking. And so that's an opportunity. And so I'm going to also ask Suzanne if there's any other ideas that she has, but that's how you could start, is looking at those report cards, then looking at the ratings, and then looking at the benchmarking.
So great answer, Mary. And the only other thing that I would add is look at the investment and see what is their criteria to call each stock or what would they put in their portfolio as being labeled in that category. Some people have different criterias, and so what you may feel deep inside and that is, that you feel is right, may be different than how the manager is valuing it, not by dollar, but what they do.
All right, thank you. Our next question, and this is for either one or both of you. In fact, I think it'd be great to hear from both of you. Do you think that women are best served with female professional advisors?
I do. I'm sure Mary does too.
Well, let me just give you a real life example. So I had the pleasure of doing this presentation at a national conference, and the presentation was a little bit longer than what I was able to do today. And afterwards, two gentlemen came up to me and congratulated me on a really good presentation. And they said, that's great and everything, Mary, but it's not performance. People want performance. And I was really, really frustrated because in that presentation, I had talked about listening to what your client wants. And women really want to focus on value-based investing. So my suggestion is this. If you're working with a male advisor and you bring this idea up to them and you feel like your idea is not being heard, and so you're not being heard or valued or appreciated, then I would suggest that you transition. And my experience has been women are more receptive. Women advisors have been more receptive to this strategy than some males. It's not to say that any male isn't, but my experience after that event was that they said, yeah, it's not performance. And I was really frustrated.
I would just add to that, we are, I think, we're organized. We get the job done. You don't have to ask us twice. Part of our job, the most valuable tool we have is listening. And, taking notes and making sure that you've incorporated what they verbally told you, what the body language looked like. And sometimes men are oblivious of what the body language might be. And I will tell you that men are appreciating that. It's not just women that are wanting women advisors, that we're seeing a real uptick in men that want the women advisors because they know that they will check off the list and get things done.
Sounds like a good argument to me. So here's another good question for y'all. Is there advice for nonprofits as to how they should approach or deal with potential donors who tend to give from donor-advised funds?
Yeah, so I can speak to that directly. First, I would highly recommend that you check out schwabcharitable.org because we do have a tab specifically related to nonprofits and some guidance that we can help them with. Second, what I've learned, I've been in the fundraising arena for over 25 years, working for various nonprofits here in Indianapolis, Indiana. And the one thing that I've learned is people only give what you ask. So if you're not asking them to utilize their donor advised fund, they're not going to do it because sometimes people just don't think about it. It's not top of mind for them. So I would highly recommend that you update your website to just plant the seed and remind people to use their donor advised fund. You can reach out and I can give you some resources that you might want to add to your website as it relates to that. And the other thing to think about, especially right now and with market volatility and COVID going on, here's what's so great about the donor advised fund. It's recession proof. So this money has been set aside for giving. And so it's no longer that person's money. So you're not going to be tapping into someone's disposable income like you would if somebody doesn't have a donor advised fund and they write the check from their checkbook. That's their disposable income. People with the donor advised fund have a bigger capacity to give because that money's been set aside. So don't hesitate asking people, could you give more this year if you know that they have the donor advised fund? But start with the Schwab Charitable website first. And then we've got some great resources and some articles out there, some research that we've recently done with the Lilly School here in Indiana, the Philanthropy School, that also can give you some additional guidance. And of course, please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions directly.
Okay. All right. And another one for both of you. Are you finding that the members of a committed couple might have different advisors? So this will be our last one for this afternoon. Again, are you finding that members of committed couples have different advisors?
I have a few clients that I work with one or the other, and there are two advisors. I will tell you that I've seen that change. I've had conversions within my practice where I worked with one, and they talk about, well, I get this from my advisor, and I didn't get that, or I wish I would have done that. And so over time, they tend to come together. But some people they want to keep those relationships separate. And I think we all just have to be respectful of what works for them, and not try to drag the other one over. Be respectful, and it'll work out if it was meant to.
And for my own personal, I'm married, no children. And so I'll just share it with you my personal situation. So my husband and I have separate retirement accounts, and then we have our joint account. And for our retirement accounts, I actually work with an advisor where my husband wants to self-direct. He loves researching. He likes to gamble. And so he's a person who wants to take chances and take on greater risk. I'm not that person. I'm a person who wants to rely on the guidance of others. So for our retirement accounts, we do have different strategies. And then for our joint account, we kind of do both. I'm very fortunate because I can get some information from my advisor that I can apply in our account, but we work our joint money together, and our individual retirement accounts, we have separate strategies on. And it works great. We've been married for 24 years and we never fight about money. So that's one of the number one fights from divorce perspective. So we don't fight about our money. I just respect his ideas and he respects my ideas.
I think that sounds like a good balance. And as you mentioned, when some of us are averse to risk, what a good way to kind of protect some of your interests, but yet still play the game, together, right?
Exactly.
That's what we're going for. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I know I learned a lot today, and my hope is that all of you in our audience did as well. If you are interested in learning more about Impact Austin, I want to encourage everyone to go to our website, www.impact.austin.org. And please make a note to come to our other events that we have going on. There's lots of educational topics that we'd love to discuss with our members and all of you out there as well who might not be. That being said, you can also go to that same website, impactaustin.org, and find out how to become a member or even to renew your membership. And if you are a member, be sure that you've checked your inbox for that member survey. Be sure that you send that in fairly soon. That's some valuable information to help us continue doing the good things that we're doing. And on a final note, if you at all are interested in learning about the grants that we give, or how we, again, make our impact in this Austin community, please do go to our Impact Austin website and be sure to /GRC. So that's impactaustin.org/GRC, and you will find some great information there. Again, thank you so much, Suzanne. Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you to Impact Austin for letting me moderate today's discussion with all of you. I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much.